At 5:41 a.m., the valley was already lost. Mist clung to the ground like wet ash, the kind that swallowed sound and made distance meaningless. Somewhere beyond the fog, a machine gun was firing in short, disciplined bursts, not panicked, not rushed, professional. Private Caleb Morrow lay flat in the mud, his cheek pressed against cold stone, listening to men die uphill. The doctrine said the high ground was safety. The doctrine was wrong. In the next 3 hours, Morrow would break every rule taught to him at Fort Benning. He would fire from a position explicitly forbidden by U.S. Army infantry manuals. And by the time the sun cleared the ridgeline, 12 enemy soldiers would be dead, killed by a man no one could see, from a place no one thought to look. His punishment would come later. The valley lay on the eastern edge of the Ardennes, December 1944, snow in patches, frozen mud underneath. Visibility maybe 40 yards, less if the fog thickened. American infantry were pinned on the slope above him. Every attempt to move was answered by fire. The machine gun had perfect elevation, perfect arcs, perfect killing lanes. Morrow had watched 2 men try to flank it from higher ground. Neither made it 10 steps. One went down screaming, hit in the thigh. The other didn't scream at all. He just collapsed, face first, rifle sliding out of his hands like it had decided it was done with him. Morrow didn't look away. He never did. Caleb Morrow was not a sniper. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't even supposed to be thinking independently. He was a replacement rifleman, 21 years old, drafted, quiet. The kind of soldier officers forgot about unless something went wrong. He grew up in eastern Kentucky, hunting raccoon and deer in tight hollows where sound carried and mistakes got you nothing but empty hands. His father taught him one thing that mattered. Animals don't look where they're told danger comes from. They look where it actually comes from. At Benning, instructors taught elevation. Find the ridge, find the tree line, control the field. In the valley, elevation meant silhouette. Silhouette meant death. Morrow lay lower than anyone else on the line. Not by design. He'd been knocked downhill by a concussive blast earlier that morning. Rolled, slid, landed hard behind a collapsed stone wall half buried in mud. The wall was old, civilian work, moss-covered, uneven, broken in places where shells had chewed through it. Most men avoided it. Too low, too exposed, no visibility. Morrow pressed his rifle through a narrow gap between stones and waited. From where he lay, he couldn't see the machine gun itself. He could see something else instead. Feet, boots moving in the fog, shadows crossing left to right. Men repositioning, confident they were untouchable. The first shot wasn't brave. It wasn't heroic. It was inevitable. The recoil drove his shoulder into the mud. The sound vanished into the fog. Somewhere uphill, a body fell, without anyone understanding why. Morrow didn't move. He worked the bolt slowly, deliberately, like he was back home, waiting for a deer to stop pretending it wasn't nervous. The doctrine said, you engage targets you can see clearly. Morrow fired at targets no one else even noticed. By the time the fog began to thin, the valley was changing, and so was the war, for everyone who survived what Caleb Morrow was about to do next. The fog didn't lift. It thinned. That was worse. Shapes became outlines. Outlines became movement. Enough to kill, if you knew where to look. Caleb Morrow stayed still. Above him, American fire slackened. Ammunition was running low. Men were pressed into shallow scrapes, afraid to raise their heads. The machine gun up the slope fired again. Short bursts, controlled, like it had all the time in the world. Morrow didn't look for the gun. He looked for the men who fed it. 2 figures emerged through the mist, moving downhill, hunched under the weight of ammunition boxes. They weren't cautious. They didn't need to be. Every threat they'd trained for came from above or straight ahead. No one trained soldiers to fear the ground. Morrow waited until the first man stepped over the stone wall. Range, 90 yards. Angle, shallow. Wind, irrelevant. He fired. The man collapsed backward, box tumbling from his hands. The second froze, eyes scanning upward, rifle swinging toward the ridgeline. Wrong direction. Morrow worked the bolt and fired again. The second man folded sideways, legs tangled, body slumping into the wall like it was trying to rest. 2. The machine gun stopped. Silence followed, the kind that made men lift their heads too early. Morrow keyed his radio once, low and controlled. Gun feed down, hold. No reply. Radios were unreliable in the valley. It didn't matter. Movement to the left. 3 soldiers advancing in a staggered line, rifles up, cautious now. They'd felt something shift. They just didn't understand what it was. Morrow adjusted his position slightly, pressing deeper into the mud, letting the wall swallow his outline. He fired at the closest man first. The soldier dropped instantly. The other 2 dove, returning fire blindly into the fog. Rounds snapped overhead, striking stone, kicking fragments into Morrow's sleeve. They were shooting high. They always did. Morrow waited. One of them crawled forward, trying to find a better angle. His helmet broke the line of the wall for half a second. That was enough. 4. The last man ran. Morrow didn't chase him. He didn't fire. Running men spread panic faster than dead ones. The fog began to lift in strips now, revealing more of the slope. The American platoon was pulling back, leapfrogging in short rushes, dragging wounded where they could. German fire intensified. A new machine gun opened up farther east. Morrow shifted his focus. Through a break in the fog, he saw them. 3 men repositioning the weapon, moving fast, trained, efficient. He fired at the gunner first. The man dropped. The weapon tipped forward, clattering into the mud. The assistant gunner tried to grab it. Morrow fired again. 6. The 3rd man ran, dragging the ammo belt behind him like a trail of breadcrumbs. Morrow let him go. He had learned something hunting in the hollows back home. If you kill everything you see, you teach the forest where you are. The cold was settling in now. Deep, the kind that crept through wool and bone alike. His fingers burned, then went numb. Morrow flexed them once. Slowly. He wasn't done. Movement uphill. An officer this time. Different posture, different urgency. He was shouting orders, pointing, trying to restore shape to something that had lost it. Morrow centered the sights. Breathed out. Fired. The officer went down hard, arms flung wide, mouth open but silent. 7. The hillside stalled. Men hesitated. Commands stopped making sense. The machine guns fell quiet one by one. For the first time that morning, the valley belonged to the Americans, and no one knew why. Morrow stayed where he was. Doctrine said reposition after engagement. Doctrine didn't know where he was hiding. The firing didn't stop all at once. It unraveled. Orders came down the line, sharp, confused, overlapping. German voices carried through the thinning fog. Short commands, hand signals replacing words. They knew something was wrong now. They just didn't know where. Caleb Morrow stayed flat behind the stone wall, cheek against rock, eyes tracking movement through gaps no one else cared about. Boots shifted. A knee touched ground. A helmet dipped too low. He fired. 8. The sound of the shot echoed differently now. The fog was lifting faster, and with it came visibility. Dangerous visibility. Morrow knew the window was closing. A burst of rifle fire tore into the wall above him, stone chipping, fragments biting into his sleeve. Someone had finally fired low. Not low enough. He didn't return fire immediately. He waited, counting breaths, letting them believe they were close. Movement downhill, 2 soldiers advancing cautiously, muzzles low, sweeping the wall line. They were learning. Morrow adjusted his aim, lowering it further than instinct wanted to. He fired at the feet. The first man went down screaming, rifle skidding across the mud. The second froze, trying to decide whether to shoot, run, or help. That hesitation killed him. 10. Up the slope, an American squad surged forward, sensing the shift. Shouts, rifle fire, momentum. German command tried to recover. A whistle cut through the air. Hand signals snapped. Men began spreading wider, checking depressions, scanning the ground instead of the trees. Too late. Morrow saw a shape kneel behind a stump. An observer, binoculars raised, searching for elevation. Morrow fired through the glass. 11. The body slumped sideways, binoculars hanging uselessly from a strap. The cold hit him all at once. Not dramatic, not sudden, just heavy. His fingers felt thick, clumsy. Reloading took effort now. The bolt resisted, metal stiff with frost. He forced it. A voice crackled in his ear. "Morrow, where the hell are you?" Company command. They'd finally noticed the effect without seeing the cause. "Low," Morrow replied. "Very low." Static, then disbelief. "You're firing from below the wall?" "Yes, sir." A pause, then quieter. "Can you keep it up?" Morrow looked down at his hands, at the mud, at the stone swallowing his outline. "Yes." A new group appeared through the fog. 5 men this time, spaced wide, rifles sweeping the ground. Good soldiers. Morrow didn't rush. He waited for the center man to step forward. He fired. 12. The others scattered, firing wildly, rounds slapping dirt and stone, never finding him. One tried to flank wide. Morrow tracked him through a narrow gap and fired again. 13. The hillside broke. German units began pulling back in fragments, no longer coordinated, no longer confident. Orders dissolved into instinct. The Americans advanced. And still, no one saw Caleb Morrow. He was just another piece of ground they didn't question. The valley went quiet by late morning. Not peaceful, just empty. Smoke drifted low along the slope. Bodies lay where momentum had abandoned them. Some face down, some twisted into shapes that suggested they'd tried to move one last time and failed. American infantry advanced carefully, rifles up, expecting resistance that never came. Caleb Morrow didn't move. He stayed behind the stone wall until he was told to stand. When he finally rose, stiff and slow, men stared. Not in admiration, in confusion. They'd expected a squad, a sniper team, something visible. Not one mud-covered rifleman emerging from the ground, like he'd been there since before the war started. A lieutenant approached him, helmet pushed back, eyes locked on the wall. "You were here the whole time?" "Yes, sir." "You fired how many rounds?" Morrow thought for a moment. 14. The lieutenant exhaled slowly. Jesus Christ. The bodies uphill told a different number. Company command arrived 10 minutes later. Captain Ellis, 32, West Point. Clean uniform despite the mud everywhere else. He listened to the reports in silence. 14 confirmed, several probable, multiple machine gun crews neutralized. Ellis looked at the wall, then at Morrow. "Who authorized this position?" Morrow didn't answer right away. "No one," he said finally. That was the wrong answer. Ellis stared at him for a long moment, not angry, calculating. "You understand you violated engagement doctrine?" "Yes, sir." "You understand you exposed the platoon by not occupying elevated cover?" Morrow met his eyes. "If I'd gone higher, I'd be dead." Silence. Ellis turned away, scanning the valley. Men moving, wounded being carried, momentum restored. "You saved lives today," Ellis said. "That's not in question." He paused. "But you created a problem." Morrow already knew. Problems in the Army weren't caused by failure. They were caused by success without permission. By afternoon, word had spread. Other riflemen asked questions, quiet ones. Where exactly had he been? How low? How did he see anything? Morrow didn't brag, didn't teach. He just answered when asked. By nightfall, 2 other soldiers had tried the same thing in different sectors. One scored a kill, one nearly froze. Command noticed. They always did. At 2100 hours, Morrow was ordered to report to battalion headquarters. No rifle, no helmet, just his name. As he walked away from the line, an older sergeant muttered quietly, "You shouldn't have been that effective." Morrow didn't reply. He understood now. The valley wasn't the dangerous part. The paperwork was. Battalion headquarters was a farmhouse that no longer belonged to anyone. The roof sagged. Windows were gone. A stove burned in the corner, more for morale than heat. Maps were pinned to the walls with bayonets. Caleb Morrow stood in front of the table, boots still caked with frozen mud. 3 officers, 1 folder, 1 problem. A major spoke first. "Explain your position." Morrow did, simply. No flourish, No justification beyond facts. Ground-level cover. Limited visibility. Targets identified by movement, not silhouette. The captain interrupted. You disregarded established infantry doctrine. Yes, sir. The colonel leaned back in his chair. Older. Tired. Eyes that had seen too many reports like this one. Doctrine exists so men don't improvise themselves into graves. Morrow nodded. Men were dying following it. Silence. The colonel tapped the folder. You're aware Field Manual 7-10 specifies elevation for engagement. Yes, sir. And yet you chose concealment over visibility. Yes, sir. The major frowned. That's not how soldiers are trained to think. Morrow didn't hesitate. It's how hunters think. That answer landed wrong. The colonel closed the folder. This isn't Kentucky. No, sir, Morrow said. It's worse. No one smiled. The captain cleared his throat. Your actions resulted in confirmed enemy casualties. Yes, sir. 14. Yes, sir. From a single position. Yes, sir. Another pause. Then the colonel said the sentence Morrow would remember for the rest of his life. Effectiveness does not grant authority. Morrow stood there, hands at his sides, feeling the cold finally leave his bones. Replaced by something heavier. I didn't ask for authority, he said. I asked for time. The colonel's expression hardened. Soldiers don't ask, they follow. Outside, artillery rumbled faintly. Someone else's problem, somewhere else. You will be charged, the colonel continued. Unauthorized tactical deviation, failure to adhere to training standards. The captain added quietly, you set a precedent. That was the real crime, not what he did, but that it worked. As Morrow turned to leave, the colonel spoke again. For the record, he said, voice low, your platoon commander reports 0 casualties after your engagement. Morrow stopped. That will be noted, the colonel said. It will not save you. Morrow nodded once. He understood now. The manual didn't bleed. Men did. The room was too clean. That was the first thing Caleb Morrow noticed. No mud, no smoke, no noise from the front. Just polished wood, pressed uniforms, and men who hadn't been in the valley. 3 officers sat behind a narrow table. A recorder clicked softly. A flag hung perfectly still. The charges were read without emotion. Unauthorized tactical deviation, violation of infantry doctrine, failure to follow established engagement procedures. Morrow listened, hands still, face blank. How do you plead? The colonel asked. Guilty. The word landed harder than any argument could have. The captain leaned forward. You're admitting to endangering your unit? Yes, sir. The major frowned. You realize this court exists to determine whether your actions were justified. I don't need justification, Morrow said. I need responsibility. That earned him a look. You could plead not guilty, the captain said. Argue battlefield necessity. Morrow shook his head. I did what I did knowing it wasn't authorized. Silence stretched. The colonel studied him. Why? Morrow answered without raising his voice. Because the men uphill were dying, and I knew a way they wouldn't. The major spoke sharply. Doctrine exists to protect soldiers. Morrow met his eyes. Doctrine protects systems. The recorder kept clicking. The colonel sighed. You understand that innovation does not come from privates. Morrow nodded. Then it comes too late. That was enough. The verdict was inevitable. Reduction in rank, confinement, forfeiture of pay. As the sentence was read, Morrow felt nothing. No anger, no regret, just clarity. Afterward, as he was escorted out, his company commander waited in the hallway. Captain Ellis didn't speak at first. Finally, he said quietly, They're already using your position. Morrow looked at him. 2 platoons, ground-level cover. Same results. Morrow nodded once. Good. Ellis hesitated. You don't care what happens to you. Morrow thought about the valley, about the boots stepping over the wall, about the silence after. I care, he said, just not about this. Ellis exhaled. History won't remember you. Morrow almost smiled. That's fine, he said. The men will. Caleb Morrow served his confinement quietly. 30 days, no incident, no appeal. By the time he returned to duty, the front had shifted east. New towns, new valleys, new names for places men would die. Morrow wasn't sent back to the line. He was reassigned. Paperwork, supply runs, jobs where thinking didn't matter. The war ended without him. In May 1945, bells rang in places he'd never see. Flags waved. Speeches were made about sacrifice and victory. Morrow boarded a transport ship home, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a rank he hadn't started with. He returned to a country that wanted silence, not stories. He worked, married, raised children. He didn't talk about the valley or the stone wall or the way fog changes the rules of war. People didn't ask. Years later, the manuals changed. Quietly, new sections appeared. Ground-level engagement, concealment over elevation in limited visibility terrain. No names attached, just diagrams. By then, Morrow was just another veteran with a stiff shoulder and no reason to explain it. In training ranges around the world, soldiers learned to do what he'd done instinctively. They were praised for it, graded on it. They never heard his name. That was how the Army preferred it, because history likes innovation, but it dislikes the men who introduce it too early. Caleb Morrow died at 68, heart failure, ordinary and unremarkable. His obituary mentioned his service. Nothing more. No valley, no court-martial, no 14 men who never walked out of the fog. Somewhere a young soldier lies pressed into the earth, firing from below, where no one expects danger to come from. He doesn't know why it works. He just knows it does. And that's how war remembers men like Caleb Morrow, by forgetting them completely.